This is really fascinating. This is Boris Johnson being interviewed by 60 Minutes Australia, where he talks about what Hamas did on October 7th, that there was support for Israel and has been, but it started to slip by many Western governments and media, where they've almost seemed forgotten what it was that Hamas did and why Israel has to fight the war she is fighting. And he also talks about the fact, the moral depravity of some that celebrated what Hamas did, that described it as resistance. Boris Johnson, former Prime Minister of Britain, has drops a lot of important truth bombs in this interview. Have a watch of this clip.
We look at Israel. How would you describe Britain's response to what's happening in Israel today?
Well, I think we began by being very logical and sympathetic, and we understood that what happened on October the 7th, 2023 was an absolute atrocity. 1,200 innocent people killed, hundreds kidnapped, hostages taken. I think there are still, maybe as many as 100 hostages still in Gaza or wherever. And I think there was the official UK position was very supportive for a long time. I'm afraid to say I think that it now seems to have morphed a bit, and
incoherent, I think, is the word you've used to describe it.
Yeah, and I think it's how can we say that, Israel's, the problem basically is this. We all mourn for the people of Gaza, we hearts bleed for the suffering of the people of Gaza. It's appalling. The kids that are losing their lives, the same goes for South Lebanon. It's appalling. But the trouble is that in both those communities, the political leadership is in the hands of people who literally want to exterminate the state of Israel and want to kill the Jewish people, every single one of them.
And by the way, let me just quickly add, it's not just the political leadership, I'm afraid. There's a lot of sympathy among the populations of Gaza, Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, and Lebanon. We've seen from polling that vast majority, 70 to 80%, even recent polling, of Arabs in the Palestinian territories still support what Hamas did on October 7th. So it's also worth bearing in mind, because people like to sometimes separate, it's just their political leadership, and it's actually a lot more, I'm afraid, a lot worse than that.
Not beginning in Israel, but then everywhere else too, right? Now, it is very, very difficult to expect a democratic government, and under those circumstances, not to take steps to protect its population. That is what I believe the Israelis are trying to do.
How do you reconcile that grief for those thousands and thousands and thousands of deaths with Israel's right to self-defense? I mean, it's a very vexing contradiction, isn't it?
This is part of the Western mindset that I just don't understand. What's the contradiction? Yes, we don't like bloodshed and war, but we have to do it. Where's the contradiction? We have to do something that we don't like to do, but we need to do it. Why can't the feeble Western moral mind understand that? There are many times in life, not just in politics, but in one's own life, where you have to do things that you need to do, even if you might not want to do it, or you might not particularly like what it is that you're doing. Why is that a contradiction? It's such weakness on the mindset of people that ask these questions.
I think it's an absolute tragedy. As long as the Palestinians are led by people who don't recognize the right of Israel to exist, and who do stuff like October the 7th, and that places any attempts to get a proper negotiated solution makes it extremely difficult. And I think that Israel must have a right to self-defense, and it's incoherent for us to say that and to say we stand shoulder to shoulder with Israel, but then to put on an arms embargo.
And so, how do you view Australia's position?
I think it is very, very difficult for us in the UK under the Labour government of Keir Starmer, or for Australia under Mr. Albanese's government. It's difficult for us to call for ceasefires and to try to impose restrictions on Israel when, as far as the Israelis see it, they're fighting an existential struggle against people who want to wipe them out. So, what you're getting from me is, pretty full-throated support for Israel. And, I know that's, a lot of people don't share that anymore, but that's really where I am. And I look at some of the scenes that, we have in London, in Sydney as well, of, people going out and with flags, not just for Hamas, but for Hezbollah, or whatever. It seems insane to me. I mean, how can decent, conscientious, liberal people support Hamas when they literally want the execution of gays? I mean, did you see, Nasrallah, the Hezbollah leader that was killed the other day? Everybody, you should have read the obituaries of this guy in some of the liberal media. Oh, great orator, statesman, charismatic, blah, blah, blah. Do you read all that stuff about Nasrallah? Did you see what he said about what the law should prescribe for people whose sexuality he doesn't approve of? I mean, these guys, to call it medieval is an insult to the relative, tolerance of the Middle Ages.
So would you consider Australia's response then to be weak?
I just think we all need moral clarity here. Who's really responsible for an attempt at a genocide? Who's trying to wipe out a country on the basis of their religion, their race? I'm afraid it's Hamas and Hezbollah financed by Tehran.
So why is that message so difficult?
And which is the democracy? Which is the country where equalities are promoted, where women are free and treated completely equally with men, where there's no discrimination against people on the basis of their gender or sexual orientation? It's Israel. Why on earth? Why aren't we supporting them?
So, but why is that moral clarification that you're talking about so difficult to find then for countries like Australia, UK,
search me gov.
Around the world?
I'll tell you why it is.
This is really interesting, by the way. He's about to get into, why it is there's so much hostility in Western countries towards Israel. And this gets really, really interesting because he starts to talk about anti-Semitism. But I would also say, by the way, that I don't think we should be using this argument as our primary argument, about the way the rights that Israel extends to people and the quality of life there. The argument that we have to respond to, which is the Palestinian anti-Israel line, is that the land doesn't belong to us. So while it's nice to hear Boris make these points about democracy and all the rest of it, we need to start saying more, this is our land because this is the Jewish people's homeland. This is Jewish land. According to international law, according to history, according to Bible, according to the rights of indigenous peoples. And most of all, if we're talking to a religious Arab world, because this is what God designated as the land for the nation of Israel. That's the real question, not is it a democracy or not. That's the language we should be using. But have a listen now to what he says about the root of this Israel hatred. Have a watch.
Tara, I'll tell you why it is. And it's a terrible thing to admit, or to face up to. But I think that underneath the floorboards of every Western civilization, every society that has its origins in Europe and Australia, America, are certainly part of that, and probably many other societies around the world, they have under the floorboards, they have the incubating spores of anti-Semitism. And sometimes it's quiescent, and sometimes it comes out. And that spore is potentiated, it comes to life in certain circumstances. And it happened as soon as October the 7th happened in 2023. You saw it immediately. The the UK stood shoulder to shoulder with Israel, but that very day, almost immediately, people were out on the streets calling for Palestine to be free from the river to the sea. Their response was not to side with Israel, but to side with people who wanted to kill all the Jewish people. And I thought that was incredible. And I honestly think that is at least one of the problems. I think that there is a tendency beneath the surface of all our cultures, Western liberal cultures and others, to anti-Semitism, and it needs to be checked, and it needs to be called out, and we need to recognize that it's a problem that humanity has, and you've got to fight it. You really have.
If we can move on to Ukraine.
Wow, that's pretty powerful stuff from Boris Johnson to recognise that and be honest about that he understands that this is something that's been going on for centuries, and it's particularly problematic in the world of monotheism, particularly in the world of Christianity and Islam. Britain has in many ways been a wonderful country to Jews, but also there's been a history of hostility to Jews in certainly the Foreign Office, the way Jews were treated when they were trying to seek refuge in British Mandate of Palestine, where they limited numbers there during the Holocaust. They had the 1939 white paper limiting Jewish entry there. Britain, there's quotes and sources of British Foreign Office officials downplaying what was happening in Nazi Europe. And he understands that this actually goes back for many, many generations. Britain was, I think, England was the first country of Europe to expel Jews. And so this is nearly 1,000 years ago. But he's right to say that these are things that run deep in the psyche of the world of monotheism. And that's because I think there's... I think a lot of this comes down to theology. And that's why I said earlier that the argument we need to be giving to the Arab world needs to be a theological one, because they don't respect, democracy, human rights, international law, all these things. What they respect is people that invoke the name of God in what they say. And hostility, historically Christian and now Islamic, comes from theological clashes, thinking that somehow the Jews are a threat, or the Jews are, the fact that they still exist or they're thriving, it ruins their narrative, their theological narrative. Parts of the Christian world have had a theological reckoning, which has allowed them to understand, okay, actually, maybe God never forsook the Jewish people. Maybe he does maintain their covenant with them. Because if he doesn't, they sort of think, well, we need to punish them, make them, force them to convert, all these things. So actually, that's going to lie at the core of a lot of this. It's going to be actually us as a Jewish people articulating with confidence, calm confidence, but nevertheless confident articulation of our theological viewpoint and raison d'etre. That's the way I think we really move forward on all of this. But nonetheless, the words of Boris Johnson show that there are still politicians out there who can get it and do get it. And I think it certainly calls for a bit of hope that there are people that can have their heads screwed on the right way and see things sanely. If you've made it so far in this video, I have a request for you. JTV has been having a really big impact in spreading the truth about Israel and creating positive associations with the Jewish people, Judaism, and Israel. We've really grown a lot, particularly in the last year, and we're having a really significant impact, both for Jews and non-Jews. But I really want to take JTV to the next level so we can start to compete with the other big online media beasts that are often peddling anti-Israel content. And the way we're going to do that is to scale even faster. So I'd love to build a team where we have other presenters doing shows like me, that start doing documentaries, supplementary content, animated content, etc., etc. And to do that, I'd like to build a bit of a team. So what we're going to do is we're going to do one fundraising day, just one, where we try and build up some funding in order to fund such a team. Now, to do that, it's going to obviously require people to get involved. And I'm wondering if you would consider, if you're watching JTV content and appreciate what we do and want to help partner with us in taking this to the next level and spreading the truth farther and wider than ever before, I wonder if you'd consider partnering with us simply by running a mini page on the fundraiser that we do, where you just reach out to your contacts on that day that we choose to fundraise and see if they'll all chip in. If you'd be up for doing that, of which I would be so grateful, then please click on the Google form link in the video description of this video, where you can simply just put in a few contact details. It'll be a very small commitment, as I say, literally just one day that we'll all agree upon as a collective community. But the impact is going to be so big. There's such strength in numbers. If we all pull together and do this, we can take this to the next level. And as I say, all of us can partner together in bringing and spreading the truth to the whole world. So please do consider clicking on that link, filling in the form, and I'll be in touch very soon to talk about the next steps. Small commitment, but a big impact. Hi, thank you so much for watching. To watch another one, click here. To stay up to date with all our content, click here to subscribe. And if you're able to, you can help support JTV to grow and grow by clicking join below this video, where you can become a member and get perks including early access to videos and private live discussions with me. But most of all, you'll be partnering with us on our mission to change the world.